Here are a few stories that will touch your heart and leave you wondering, why did they still go on further? I've always heard that the allure of some caves and water bodies can only be known when you are standing in front of the cave. I'm sure one day I'm going to go on an adventure of my own, and if it's got anything in the lines of the Intestine, the Death Cave, or the Soul Eater, or even the Cave of Despair, I promise to literally pack my bags and go back home. Here are 3 stories that might leave you as traumatized as they left me. On January 15th, 1995, Frank was winding down for the night. After a busy day, he finally had a moment to himself as he stood under the warm shower. As the water ran over him, his mind wandered. It had been a good day, and he was already thinking about what was ahead for tomorrow, but then he felt a shiver down his spine, something strange and unsettling. His son, Con, was supposed to be home by now, after spending the weekend with his friends on an adventurous caving trip. Con, known to his friends as Conley, was an adventurous spirit. He was a member of the Kevin Street Caving Club at the Dublin Institute of Technology in Ireland. That weekend, he and his friends had planned to explore Cradle Hole Cave, just over the border in Northern Ireland. It was supposed to be a fun and memorable trip. Con loved the thrill of caving, climbing, and exploring, and he had dreams of one day climbing Mount Everest. This trip was just another chapter in his journey. Frank turned off the shower, and in the quiet that followed, he heard faint voices downstairs. Something was wrong. He knew it in his gut. Quickly drying off and dressing, he made his way downstairs. There he found his wife talking to a police officer. The look on their faces said everything. Con was missing. Up in Northern Ireland, Cradle Hole Cave is known to locals as a sinkhole. It's a huge, natural feature, over 100 meters long, 60 meters wide, and 35 meters deep. Thousands of years of erosion had worn away the bedrock, creating a vast underground system of chambers and passages. The river that runs through Cradle Hole echoes around the cave, filling it with the constant sound of rushing water. The cave itself is divided into 2 main sections, the upper Cradle Hole and the lower Cradle Hole. The upper part of the cave requires wading through the river to get into large chambers decorated with rock formations, and from there, the water flows into an underground lake. Con and his group of friends, including 20-year-old Philip and 22-year-old Patrick, had entered Cradle Hole with high spirits. They'd spent the previous day exploring another cave, and while it had been challenging, they were ready for another adventure. Among the group, Patrick was a club founder, and Philip was a regular member. Although the group had done some caving before, they were not professionals, and Cradle Hole would push them far beyond their limits. As noon approached, the college students entered the mouth of Cradle Hole, walking through a huge chamber on the other side. There was a narrow tunnel ahead that seemed to lead deeper into the cave system. They waded through the cold, flowing water, with Patrick leading the way. He was concerned about the strong current in the wide-open chamber, and he feared it might become even stronger in the narrow passage. So, he told the group to hold back while he went ahead to check the conditions. Northern Ireland had experienced days of heavy rain before their arrival, so much of the water was still filtering into the cave. The river was running higher and faster than usual. Despite Patrick's concerns, he didn't realize the full extent of the danger. Smiling back at the others, he took a deep breath and started forward. Suddenly, the powerful current caught him, and he was pulled out of sight in an instant. Philip, seeing Patrick disappear, jumped in to help, but the current was too strong. He was caught up as well, swept away in moments. Con, seeing both of his friends vanish, also tried to help. He too was taken by the force of the river. In a matter of seconds, the 3 young men were trapped in the narrow, flooded passage, with no space to breathe as the water forced them through. The other 7 members of the group stood there, staring in shock, trying to process what had just happened. They were expecting Patrick, Philip, and Con to reappear any moment, maybe with laughter at the prank they thought had just happened. But as seconds turned to minutes, the realization of the danger set in. Their friends were not coming back anytime soon. The group spent the next few hours frantically searching through different tunnels, calling out in hopes of finding their friends. But Cradle Hole is vast and complicated, with countless passages and hidden pockets. They shouted, scrambled, and explored as far as they could. but there was no trace of the 3 missing men. Around 4 p.m., after nearly 4 hours of searching, the group finally gave up and exited the cave to call for help. Emergency services responded quickly. Around 50 rescuers, including police divers and experienced cavers, arrived to help. Helicopters from Britain's Royal Air Force hovered above, scanning the surrounding area and looking for any sign of the 3 men. They searched for hours until night fell, and then called off the search until morning. Meanwhile, as rescue efforts paused, officers were tasked with delivering the devastating news to the families of the 3 missing men. Frank, Khan's father, listened with a heart full of dread. He knew in his gut that he would soon be identifying his son's body. The search resumed the next morning, with conditions slightly improved. The river's current had slowed, and the water level had dropped. The rescuers held on to a glimmer of hope that maybe the 3 young men had found an air pocket or an open chamber where they could wait for help. Tragically, that hope faded quickly. 24 hours after the men entered Cradle Hole, the searchers found Patrick and Philip's bodies. They had been swept deep into the cave system by the current, trapped in a dark, water-filled passage with nowhere to go. The search continued, and a day later, they found Khan's body. He, too, had been caught in the powerful current and taken away from his friends and family. Today, a plaque stands outside Cradle Hole Cave, honoring the memory of Khan, Philip, and Patrick. It is a solemn reminder of the lives lost in the depths of that dark, mysterious place, and of the risks faced by those who dare to explore the unknown. On August 19, 2016, 12 Italian divers prepared to dive off the coast of Palinuro, Italy. This small resort town, about 200 kilometers southeast of Naples, is famous for its beautiful waters and attracts divers every summer. The day's plan was to explore the immersion wall, a massive underwater cliff with many small cave entrances, a perfect spot for seeing colorful fish and other underwater life. The diving group was led by Mauro Cardella, a 49-year-old diving instructor and owner of a local diving center. He was passionate about diving, spending nearly every day in the water. His assistant, Mauro Tanca, and their close friend, 58-year-old Silvio Anzola, joined him. Anzola, while not a diving instructor, was experienced and shared Cardella's enthusiasm for underwater exploration. However, the waters around Palinuro are known for a history of diving accidents. Locals even speak of a curse in the area. There had been several tragic incidents over the years, with multiple divers losing their lives in the caves. Despite these stories, the group planned to stay safe by avoiding caves and focusing on the wall itself. As they descended into the clear blue water, they were met with stunning views of the cliffside, alive with vibrant marine life. Around 11:30 a.m., most of the group started resurfacing, coming up one by one and sharing their excitement over the dive. However, Cardella, Tanca, and Anzola didn't return to the surface. At first, the other divers weren't worried. The 3 were highly skilled and may have wanted to stay down a bit longer to take in more sights or explore something interesting. Time passed, and the rest of the group began to feel uneasy. They attempted to check around the dive area, but quickly realized they didn't have the right training or certifications to safely enter the caves. The other divers returned to the surface, and after hours of waiting, finally contacted local authorities. Palinuro's fire rescue team arrived on the scene, prepared for underwater operations, but they were not trained for the cave's complexities. Soon, the authorities reached out to Fabio Barbieri, a local diving expert and the first person to map out one of the caves, called Grotta della Scaletta, or Ladder Cave. This cave is known for its narrow, winding paths that branch off into tunnels and vertical shafts. The entrance, sitting about 14 meters below the surface, leads to a horizontal tunnel that eventually intersects with a tight passage known among divers as the Intestine of Palinuro. This part of the cave is notorious for its dangerous twists, limited visibility, and silt that clouds up easily with any movement, creating near-zero visibility. Fabio knew this cave well and feared the worst. Fabio agreed to enter the cave to look for the missing divers. He entered the water and carefully made his way down to the cave entrance, navigating through the dark tunnels with his flashlight. As he reached the intestine, his flashlight caught the outline of something in the tunnel, but the silt in the water was so thick that he could barely see anything clearly. Realizing the dangerous conditions, he surfaced and informed the authorities that the men were likely trapped or had lost their way in the silted-out cave. Word spread quickly throughout Palinuro, and the tight-knit diving community was shocked and heartbroken. Posts flooded social media, with friends and family holding on to hope, hoping for any sign that the three men would be found alive. Fabio, though, knew the reality of the situation and suspected that they had not survived long before the authorities had even been called. As rescue divers entered the cave the following morning, visibility remained poor. The silt from the bottom had clouded the water, making it difficult for even experienced divers to see. It took nearly 4 hours for the divers to locate Cardella and Tanka, whose bodies were found just outside the entrance of the Intestine. Even though Fabio had been close to them the previous day, the visibility was so bad that he had missed them by just a few feet. Silvio's body, however, was more challenging to recover. Rescue divers found him further inside the narrow intestine tunnel, where his body had become tightly wedged in one of the narrower passages. Due to his position, it took another 6 days for rescuers to carefully retrieve him from the cave. Once the recovery was complete, an investigation began to determine what had gone wrong. The initial findings suggested that when all 12 divers reached the wall, the group split up, either by plan or as an impromptu decision. At some point, Cardella, Tanka, and Anzola decided to enter the cave, possibly to explore a bit or satisfy their curiosity. Investigators believe that the three men managed to make it through the intestine safely on the way in. However, as they attempted to exit, Silvio became trapped, his equipment snagging on the narrow, rocky walls of the passage. Facing the entrance of the cave, Silvio struggled to free himself, blocking the narrow tunnel. The restriction had likely caused a buildup of silt, clouding the water and making visibility nearly impossible. Cardella and Tanka likely swam past Silvio without realizing he was caught, believing he was right behind them. When they didn't see him outside, they may have re-entered the cave to search for him. The most tragic aspect of this situation was likely the limited amount of air they had left in their tanks. Investigators concluded that by the time they went back to look for Silvio, they were probably close to using up their reserve air supply. In a cave as tight and disorienting as the intestine, losing visibility and air would have left them with very few options. They likely ran out of air as they worked to free Silvio, leaving them trapped in the dark, silty water with no chance of survival. Cardella and Tanka's actions during the ordeal were seen as brave and selfless. They risked their lives trying to help their friend, refusing to leave him behind, even as their own lives were at risk. The diving community mourned them as heroes, men who valued friendship and loyalty above all else. The tragedy of August 19, 2016, is remembered in Palinuro, a place forever marked by both the breathtaking beauty and hidden dangers of its underwater caves. The tale of the three divers' bravery and their dedication to each other serves as a solemn reminder to those who dive in the beautiful yet treacherous waters of Palinuro. In December 2002, a group of girls gathered at a group home in Cedar City, Utah. The home was a place where girls with various emotional, behavioral, and substance issues came to get help and work through their struggles. On this particular day, the air was filled with anticipation. The girls were all called into a meeting by one of the counselors, and after the room quieted down, the counselor made an exciting announcement. A special field trip had been planned for Christmas Eve. It wasn't just any field trip, though. This one was going to be different from all the others. The group home was no stranger to field trips. Over the years, the girls had visited many places, from art museums to outdoor parks. But this Christmas Eve trip would stand out. Each girl in the home had their own story that brought them there. But there was one girl who didn't quite seem to fit in with the rest. Her name was Kylie. Kylie wasn't like the other girls. When she first arrived at the group home, she seemed like the typical good girl. With her glasses, dirty blonde hair, and plain clothes, she gave off the impression of being a bit of a nerd. Most of the other girls thought she was a goody two-shoes, and they weren't sure what to make of her. But over time, Kylie revealed that she was much more than that. She was funny, warm, and down to earth. She had a unique ability to make even the saddest girls laugh when no one else could. Kylie became a friend to everyone, always ready to lift the spirits of those around her. But Kylie's story wasn't all smiles. She had been adopted as a baby by an upper-class family, but things didn't turn out as expected. Despite the loving home, she ended up going down a path of self-destruction as a teenager. Kylie turned to drugs, alcohol, and partying. She found herself caught up in reckless behavior and eventually ran away from home. That's how she ended up in the group home, seeking a second chance. Kylie became close friends with Megan and Keir, two other girls at the home. The three of them stuck together through thick and thin. They looked forward to field trips because they offered a break from their daily routines and a chance to experience something different. But when the counselors told them about the Christmas Eve field trip, Keir couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. She had a strange sense that something bad was going to happen, although she couldn't put her finger on why. She shared her feelings with the counselors and therapists, but they brushed it off as nothing. However, when the destination for the field trip was revealed, Keir's instincts kicked in. The counselors were taking the girls to Bloomington Cave, a remote and somewhat notorious underground tunnel system located in the southwest corner of the state. The cave was popular, but not for good reasons. While it had been a favorite hangout for Boy Scouts and caving enthusiasts for over a century, it also attracted those seeking to do illegal activities, such as drug use and underage drinking. The cave's walls were covered in graffiti, and the floor was littered with trash and even human waste. Keir knew that Bloomington Cave had a dark history, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen there. Despite Keir's unease, the other girls, including Kylie and Megan, were excited. They thought it was going to be a fun and adventurous trip. But Keir couldn't stop worrying. The cave had an eerie reputation, and deep down, she feared that something was going to go wrong on that day. Bloomington Cave had a long and troubled history. It was discovered in the late 1800s, and for many years, it was a popular spot for local Boy Scouts and caving enthusiasts to explore. But over time, the cave became a site for illicit activities, and it was eventually declared dangerous. In 1952, the Dixie Grotto Caving Club, a group of caving enthusiasts, evaluated the safety of the cave and concluded that it was too hazardous for exploration. The club recommended that the cave be closed off to the public to prevent accidents. In 1953, an attempt was made to close the cave by wiring its entrances with dynamite and blasting them shut, but the efforts didn't work. Teens found ways to move the rocks and reopen the entrances. A second attempt to close the cave was made in 1954, but it was also unsuccessful. Eventually, the cave became a known spot for thrill seekers who disregarded the risks. Despite efforts to protect it, Bloomington Cave remained open, and people continued to enter, often without the proper training or equipment. By the late 1970s, the Salt Lake Grotto Caving Club took an interest in mapping the cave. In 1977, they measured the cave and documented over 3,000 feet of tunnels. But even this experienced group decided the cave was too dangerous to continue exploring. Years later, in 1999, local caving enthusiasts continued where the others left off, measuring the cave to be over 7,000 feet in length. Despite the warnings, people still ventured into the cave, unaware of the dangers lurking within. On Christmas Eve, 2002, the group of girls and their counselors loaded into a van and began their journey to Bloomington Cave. The drive took about an hour and a half, and after traveling down a long, unpaved road, they finally reached the parking area. Once they arrived, the girls were split into two groups, each led by a counselor. The group was instructed to form a straight line, with the counselors leading the way. From the outside, the cave was hard to spot. After the dynamite blasts, the south entrance was little more than a hole in the ground. To get inside, the girls and counselors had to crawl and crawl. Inside the cave, it was a maze of narrow passages, wide tunnels, and rock piles that reduced the space to just a few feet. It was clear that exploring the cave would require care and caution. The group squeezed through a narrow tunnel and entered a chamber known as the Big Room. This was the largest area in the cave, and it was filled with stunning natural formations, including stalactites hanging from the ceiling and large boulders scattered across the floor. The beauty of the cave was lost on many of the girls, though. After crawling through tight passages to get to the big room, some of the girls began to feel uneasy. The further they went into the cave, the more they realized that the trip didn't feel as safe as they had thought. Despite the growing fear, the counselors instructed the girls to hold hands and continue walking through the cave. Kylie and Megan were in the same group, and they grabbed onto each other's hands tightly as they moved forward. Megan could sense that Kylie was scared, which only made her own fear grow. This was the first time Megan had ever seen fear in Kylie, who had always seemed so strong and confident. Kylie, visibly shaken, needed reassurance. Megan encouraged her to keep going, promising that everything would be okay. But in a moment of fear, Megan let go of Kylie's hand for just a second. In that split second, everything went wrong. A loud tumbling sound echoed through the cave, followed by screams. A thud sounded from somewhere below. Megan quickly turned around, expecting to see Kylie behind her. But Kylie was gone. The group's lights were all pointed in Megan's direction, and that's when they saw the rock ledge to their left. It dropped 150 feet. The counselors quickly shone their lights downward and saw Kylie's motionless body lying on the rocks below. Several counselors rushed down to where Kylie had fallen, while others called for help. Time was of the essence, and the situation was dire. When rescuers arrived and climbed down to where Kylie lay, it was immediately clear that there was no hope. The fall had caused severe injuries, and it was too late to save her. A search and rescue team spent the rest of the day removing Kylie's body and transporting her to the morgue. The group home contacted Kylie's adoptive parents to inform them of the tragedy. They were devastated and demanded answers. The incident quickly became controversial. In an interview with the Salt Lake Tribune in 2022, the person in charge of the group home at the time stated that the home was not responsible for Kylie's death. He claimed that the medical examiner had told him that Kylie had an undiagnosed heart condition and that the fall had been caused by a cardiac arrest, not by the accident itself. He argued that even if Kylie had not been at the cave that day, her heart condition would have caused her death eventually. However, many believed that the real issue was the lack of preparation and safety measures during the field trip. The group had only 8 light sources among all 20 people. 5 counselors had lamps, and the girls had to share just 3 flashlights. This was far below the number of lights recommended for a group of that size. Just before Kylie fell, the visibility was so poor that the girls were feeling their way forward with their feet, unsure if the ground ahead was solid or not. It's unclear whether Kylie lost her balance or took a wrong step, but when the lights illuminated the area, it was clear how much of a difference proper lighting would have made. The official police report and autopsy listed Kylie's cause of death as liver lacerations and blunt trauma from the fall, not from any heart condition. Despite the tragic circumstances and the lack of proper safety measures, the group home was never held accountable for the accident.